Today, I wanted to make this sound like a personal interview, not an obituary. So I've had to go back.
Now that'll be encouraging.
I've had to go back 2 or 3 times like, no, that sounds like an obit. I don't want to do that.
Now you should have got an old man for this, not one of us young chickens.
Well, that's true. That's true. I'm going to start out by saying, and I don't want to get emotional, but I'm going to start out by saying that this man has been a huge influence in my life through the years, and a role model, because he would tackle whatever it was he wanted to do, and so that was always a good role model for me. His only black mark in the only one I can think of, is we had a little incident one time on the 4th of July with a Roman candle. And, but a few years later, there was payback, so we're all even with the Roman candles. But no matter what it says on a Roman candle, you do not hold one in your hand. So, anyway, we're gonna start out, and this is not gonna be very formal, because I don't know how to do formal, but I'm gonna just let Edgar talk, and then I'm going to interrupt him whenever I see fit, I guess. But anyway, just start out, Edgar. Tell me about Edgar Hamm, born, raised.
Have we got lights?
We got lights.
If I tell you all of it, we're going to need lights.
They're out there. They can get up at any time.
Well, what? Do you want to know what now?
I want to know where you were born and raised.
I was born right down there at SNA Hospital.
In town?
In town. Yeah, because when Dad brought me up here, there wasn't no highway, the snow was so deep, he had to get out in the fields with his old truck and bring Mom up here to get me up here at the hospital. And I was late because I weighed right at 12 pounds. So, like me, I'm always late for everything. So I was born right here in this town. And I've lived out there on the creek every year, nearly 85 years. Never left to go to college, didn't get drawn for the draft in the war. So I've been right there on the creek.
I wanted to ask you, because when I was a kid, we used to go down on the creek some, and I wanted to ask you about Isidore.
All right, Isidore, when I was a little shaver, just a little knee-high shaver, I can still remember the old post office building. It was right out due west of our house, about 100 yards. Big building. I don't know why they had such a big building for a post office. And then the only other building in town in Isidore, the town site was 320 acres. And the only other building in the town site was a little concrete block house down on the creek that Mr. Ober built back when Isidore first popped up. And an old widow lady, Alberta C., sweetest little old lady that God ever created. She drove a little Model T car. It had that little square box on the back of it. I still see her. And every time she'd go to town, she'd come up to the house, see if Mother needed anything. And every time she'd come, she'd be dressed in black. Black hat, black dress. But she'd get in that little Model T car, and there she'd go. Well, and then across on the west side of Isidore, the buildings are all gone there now. The pens are all tore down. An old gentleman lived there, Walter Bradley. That Walt is the one that gave me most of the history that I know about Isidore, because his dad was there when Isidore started. And the old post office, it's all gone, tore down. Walt moved most of the lumber out of the post office over to his place to build his hog pens and sheep pens and dog pens and chicken pens and turkey pens, and you name it, and it was there. So there's nothing left there where the old post office was. And all I can say, all the Walt Bradleys over west is all down. And then the only things left is the little cemetery plot where the Obers and the C's are buried. I never did really understand how come it was such a small grave plot, because Isidore was a pretty good-sized town, and I know they had to have lots of deaths back then, but that was the only thing I ever heard or had anything told about, was that one little cemetery where the C family and the Ober family was buried. But down to the little rock house, well, Alberta C moved in there after Mr. Ober died. And that's where she lived for years until she died. Well, the old rock house is still there. And it's what it started out as Mr. Ober's house, and then it turned into a church house. Because Isidore had two church houses and two different churches. So that one room was a Sunday school classroom, that brick rock that he had built. He was a concrete masonry, and he built concrete blocks, and he built the round well casings that they put when they was digging wells rather than having to use bricks. And so then he passed away, and Alberta moved in that house and lived there until she died. Well, that old house is still there, and the only other living thing or solid structures left there is Panther Springs, the steps going to Mr. Ober, and I'm sure some of the other men in the Isidore town site helped build it. But it's pretty deep down to the springs, and the concrete steps are still there, which the spring, they went in there and dug it out about 12, 14 foot deep, Walt said, put concrete casings, well casings, and brought it up about 3 foot above the ground. Well, it filled up with water and over the top. Well, that's where everybody got their water, because there wasn't another well on the 320-acre town site. Everybody got their water there, and I can remember used to, when Dad, he had a cistern for their house water, but he was always trying to plant, her mother was trying to plant trees up on the hill. Well, he'd get his sled and pull down there, and you had to walk down these steps because it's pretty deep incline down to the springs. And I remember hauling water up to water those trees with. So the only thing left of Isidore is a little rock building church house. And Mr. Ober had a stamp that he put in all them concrete blocks that he built. Well, I've still got that concrete stamp. That is, you've probably seen it.
That was going to be my next question. I was like, where did if you've ever been to any building that Edgar ever built, it's got an Isidore stamp in the concrete. And I was going to ask where that stamp came from.
Well, butting in on my story, my dad wound up with it. He went to a farm sale somewhere and bought a box of junk. Well, when he was going through it after he got home, his stamp was in that box of junk. So then I wound up with it. But Mr. Ober built buku of them blocks, and all the houses in Isidore was wood structure houses, but they'd use them for the foundation blocks. But the sightseers and the tourist hunting people have carried all of them off by now. There's not, you can't find, other than that rock building, you can't find an Isidore block that's got that stamp. But once I get through pouring concrete out in Hamsville, I'm going to bring that stamp up here and give it to the museum. Now, back down there on the springs, I kind of hate to bring this up because I don't want to mess up the Oklahoma history books. But the story that I got from a man that was there at the time that Teddy Roosevelt came through on one of his big wolf hunts, but I think they was hunting cows instead of wolves, but on the big wolf hunt, well, they had a colored man was the cook. And they were camped, Walt said, up just a little bit above where the cemetery is now. So he was having to walk down to the springs to get water to fix for supper or dinner or whatever meal he was fixing. And they all carried side guns back then. And so on his trip down or back, he confronted this panther and killed it. Well, of course, Teddy got all the credit, and may have now. I'm not arguing with the history books. But according to the old man that was there, the colored cook killed the panther. Teddy got the prestige and the honor for killing the Black Panther. So that's when Isidore got started, because they named it Panther Springs, where different people started coming in there, and it was a large town at one time. Had a lot of residents. And Walt said every weekend it'd be a dance that he could remember back when he was young. Part of it, every weekend have horse races, horseshoe pitching contest and hatchet throwing contest, and had a big swimming pool called the Blue Swimming Hole right down below Panther Springs in the Deep Red Creek bottom. Had sandy beaches on both sides and in the end of it, where the kids could go in there and adults and swim. So he said it was a big function there every evening, every Saturday evening on the weekend. Well, finishes, I don't know, you got some more questions you want to ask about Isidore, or you want to keep going?
Well, no, I mean, whenever you're finished talking about Isidore.
Okay, well, and Isidore, reason why Isidore's not there now, because the railroad missed Isidore. When they put the track in from Frederick to Wichita Falls, it missed Isidore. So that railroad then was the main source of livability and transportation. So they started moving some of the buildings from, well, when the first building was put up there in the depot, they built the depot. It was called Slap Happy Junction. Now, how they got that name, I don't know. But then, when they finally did name Hollister, an old gentleman, Hollister, was the depot agent here at Frederick. And so they named that depot agent down there, they named that depot Hollister. So different Isidore people started jacking their buildings up, Walt said, and putting it on skids and dragging it to Hollister. And there was a lot of them still left there that didn't move over. But even now till today, and right there at the courthouse, I check every year. I own some lots scattered all over the town site, along with a few other people, few heirs of the families that lived there. And so back, Dad bought most of them, the lots that I've got. So I got to thinking after I got up and went to Bourne with my own auger, I said, I need to try to buy some of them lots, because according to the state law, the township is entitled to a street and an alley to every lot as long as there's something on it, growing on it. So I said, if that thing ever comes up for sale, and they got to go out there and go around all my streets and all my alleys, ain't nobody gonna want that thing. Well, that was a forest dream. That won't ever come effective. I keep asking the girls up to the tax office, well, did you have any renegers that didn't pay their taxes? No, Edgar, sure didn't. Said they all paid it. And the taxes on them lots are $1 a piece. $1 a lot.
How big is the lot?
I don't know, who's it? 50 foot by... People bought lots here in town. How big is a lot?
25 by 140. 25 by 140.
That's a lot. Yeah. So each one of them cost $1. But
So are you the biggest landowner in Isidore?
I'm the biggest landowner in Isidore.
There's
And
your legacy. Hang on right there. There's your legacy. You're the biggest you'll be the biggest landowner in Isidore.
So there's one lady called me up that had some lots out there, and I can't remember her name, Walter. And she had some sickness and some health problems, and she had called the courthouse, and the girls had told her they need to contact me. I might buy them off of her. So she called me. So to do her right, I had Terry Brink go out and appraise them. And then Terry come back with an appraisal. She had them scattered here and there, and he was figuring the land, I don't know what he was figuring, but wound up for them few lots was going to cost over $1,000. So I called her back and thanked her for the opportunity that I had a chance to buy them, but I believe I'd let it pass. So I check every year, though, and they say, no, they paid all their taxes. So that's pretty well what I know about Isidore. The other thing about Isidore I never could find out, and Walter never could tell me, Bradley, that the schoolhouse is across the section line over in the next section. In the southeast corner of that section is the Isidore schoolhouse. And the old cellar is still there, good shape. So Mr. Rover, he just concrete mixers. And but why they didn't build a schoolhouse over on the 320 acres, I never did know. So So that's all I'm gonna tell you.
All right. Now we're going to skip ahead to the feedlots, the bull test, and wherever you want to go from there.
Well, that's a big skip.
Well, there's something in between there you want to talk about. We can. We got a limited time.
Well, good. So they shut the juice off at a certain time, I'll go for that. Well, starting back at the feedlot, the love of my life, we got married right out of school. I started out and needed to make some money, so I bought me a bunch of turkeys. And at that time, Purina had a program, and what got me on that program was Rob Roy Blankenship. He was Bill and Carl Casty's secretary. And then me being brother-in-law, Rob Roy knew about me, and so he got me on this Purina deal that they'd finance the turkeys and the feed. So, to make this long story short, I got in, I don't know, about 3,000 or 4,000 turkeys, built the pens and pinioned all of them's wings. They was built for whites and broad-breasted bronze, so they couldn't fly out. Well, it come turkey time, and I said, well, I'm going to sell all these turkeys. So then there wasn't all these rules they have at the grocery stores. So I ordered me a bunch of some real fancy bags, freezer bags, and made a deal with Mr. Canals down here at the produce that I could use his cleaning room. So I built me a trailer and I could haul 50 turkeys at a time. I'd haul them up there and clean 50 turkeys. And that's when the Frederick Ice House was open, had them big lockers. And I'd go down there and store them in that locker. Well, I'd get my old Coca-Cola pop coolers, didn't have them good ice chests then. And I'd load up a few of them turkeys and I'd take off to the grocery store. Wichita Falls, Vernon, Altus, Lawton. I'd take them into the meat market. Well, I sold every one of them turkeys, except a few of them little Beltsville whites that I didn't sell them. But I sold them all to them grocery stores, every stinking turkey. Well, I had a turkey shoot out there, shooting at targets on the board. And I never will forget Max Walder and Pete McIntyre were two crack shots. But when they left out of there with about 40, 50 turkeys apiece. So that was turkey. So then I needed to make a little extra money. That turkey wasn't going to work, I could see. So I got into the caged hen business. My old shop building that Dad had built years ago, I put louver doors on the side for air vent and rigged me up an old fan at the attic, filled that full of them cages. Well, I bought them off Charlie Fowler. Charlie had a terrible tornado down here south end of town and tore his chicken cage houses up. So I bought a bunch of the cages wasn't tore up, put in cage deals, started selling them caged eggs, and I made a deal with the manager here at United that I'd bring him them caged eggs. But it got to the point when I'd bring them eggs up here, those housewives would be there waiting. They knew the morning I brought the eggs in, they'd be waiting to get them because they didn't have enough to go around. So I thought, So I approached some of them ladies. I said, lady, would you like me to deliver these eggs to your house for just a little bit more? Yeah, you bet. So I had an egg delivery. I delivered them eggs all over town and got out of that. Well, then, through Rob Roy Blankenship, I give him credit. Carl Casty had 5 quarters and 80 of land down 6 miles west of Granfield. Nice brick house on it that he had built for Earl Kinder, and it was up for rent. So I rented that land off Carl, and I farmed it down there for, 3 or 4 years, and then in the meantime, well, Dad had come up with his first heart attack, and then in the meantime, me and Mr. Casty, we'd got to where that we was kind of on the outs most every time we met out there in the field. When I'd see that big Buick car coming, I'd get all ready. The fight's fixing to start. So finally I got away from that. Got up there, and after I got back up there, I said, I'm going to build a feedlot. So I started out, and I built me a feedlot, 600 head feedlot. And bought me a set of scales and went to KMA, Texas, and bought my old oil tanks and made my feed bins, and I built me a distributor up the top with an old Mayrath auger that I could work all my different cables and go to different bins, and got that rigged up. Then I started making the sails, filling up my feed bins, and all I had was a little old 16-foot bumper trailer. So I said, I need something bigger to haul, because at that time, John Hugh Taylor, I didn't have enough cattle a lot of times for John Hugh, and I can't remember John Hugh's truck driver. He was a colored man, good with your cattle, good driver. But anyway, I wasn't buying enough cattle to have John Hugh come, like, say, down to Ardmore, Gainesville, or wherever. So I had a load of fats, and Bob Bowden was hauling my cattle to Fort Worth for me. I was selling them to Katy Kate, Newhall Mac. So I rode down there with him on one load. While I was down there, I'd never seen one. I seen this 16-foot tandem gooseneck trailer. I said, Bowden, look at that trailer sitting there beside that. Ain't that something? And I said, shoot, Fuzzy, I said, stop when we get unloaded. I want to get out and look at that trailer. So I got out and looked at it, and I said, by George, there's my answer. So I got home. My shop was 28 foot long. My chicken house was 28 foot long. So I said, I'm going to make this trailer 28 foot long. Unknown of, unheard of. Well, to make this long story short, at that time you couldn't buy anything other than 5-foot axles, heavy enough to support a livestock trailer. If you went over 5 foot, you had to get in to the trailer house axles. Well, they weren't bearinged and leafed enough to facilitate the load. So I had to go with 5 foot. And so I got her all built, got her all painted and all spit shined. I went to Amsco and had all my fender forms broken and my bows bent, and had her all spit shined and ready to go. Well, then we had a lot of good folks living in the community. Everybody had to be there the next morning to see it christened. We didn't have an old champagne bottle or nothing, an old whiskey or a beer bottle, but we had to christen it the next morning. Well, there come a shower that night. The ground was kind of spongy. So all I had was a little half-ton International pickup that I bought off old Lewis Box down here. So I pulled out there and hooked onto my trailer, pulled her out of the shop. Had never hooked onto it before. Backed her up to the chute, got back there. I just got in a load of little old light stockers. And I can't remember now, but I put about, it was 18 or 20 head in that one trailer. Well, everybody standing around there hollering, Ed, you'll never untrack it. Well, at that time, Billy Roy Kinder was still able to get around. Well, he had snuck up there and mashed my emergency brake on. Well, I never used my emergency brake, not ever. Didn't even know how to release it. So, man, I get them all loaded, and I get in that old pickup, this old 4-speed, my old leg was a quiver, man. I got it. You got to go, Greedy. Greedy, you got to go. I let that on the ground. Killed it like you turned the tweak on. Killed. So, I cranked her back up, put her up in grandma, let out on the clutch easy. I said, something's wrong. Well, finally, it dawned on me. I looked down there, and there that emergency brake was. So I got to trying to figure out how to get it loose. Well, I got it loose. Put her in grandma, and boy, here we went. Right up that spongy hill, went out to the road, turned, went a half mile south, backed around the corner and come back. I had her plumb down and high on the way back. Tickled to death. So backed up and unloaded it, and I remember I took my hat off. I said, okay, boys, y'all take back everything you said about the trailer. So then about a day or two later, it might have been longer than that, Ed and Billy Kinder was helping me haul some cattle back from the river that I'd leased some feed stalks off of Bergen McFall. And I had cattle grazing on those feed stalks, and they was helping me haul them home. Well, Ed had a 16-foot two-spar trailer built over at Lawton. I still got a little 14-foot that Toots built. It was helping me. I can remember when we unloading that last load, and that's when Billy could still get around pretty good. Ed went over to Billy and said, "Son, tomorrow we're going to take off to Texas. We're going to find it. We done hauled about 3 or 4 loads. We're going to buy us one of these gooseneck trailers." 2 or 3 days later, here he come with it. So that kind of the story on the feedlot.
And then how did the feedlot turn into?
Well, then the feedlot, at the time, Kenneth Holloway had a job with Oklahoma Beef Industry, something about the Oklahoma Beef Cattle Association. And he had met all different people all over the country. And he told me, and he and Sue Ann was living there in the feedlot house. Because in the past meantime, that Dad had passed away, and I'd moved Mom up here to town and I bought that place there. So June and I was living up there. And Kenneth and Sue Ann was living in the feedlot house. So he said, we need to start a bull test station. So he gave me some highlights on it. And I said, "Well, can we get any bulls to test?" He said, "Yeah, I think so." So I called them a bunch of Hamm May, and they went to hauling in pipe and sucker rod. Well, I started building. And I welded, and I welded, and I welded, and I welded. And I never will forget old Troy Kinder, bless his heart. He'd come down there someday, sit there for hours. "Oh, that ain't gonna work. That ain't gonna work. That ain't gonna work. What are you doing that for?" Good man, good neighbor. But anyway, got that built. And the first rattle out of the box, we filled it fully. Bulls all over Oklahoma. A few out of Texas, a few out of Kansas. And that's when Laxton was the county agent. He'd come out every month and he'd witness. We weighed every month, recorded records. And we raised the 2 world record weaning weight calves. We fed 2 of them out there at the Southwest Sahara Evaluation Center. So I had to build another row of bull test pens. So the bull test station was, because I had the feedlot there and had all the feed mixing equipment, so everything worked in good. So we fed a lot and lots and lots of bulls. Well, a little bit later, OSU started their bull test station. Well, with them being OSU and having a connection and the seniority they had, they pretty well, because they could do a lot more advertising and more promotion on the different breeds, because it was an all-breed station. And so then we finally shut the bull station down. And then the fat market got sour. I'll never forget, I had one pen. Each one of my pens would hold 100 head. Had 6 pens. I had one pen of big steers weighing 1,200, that I had free and clear. They was mine. By the time that market got done souring, it took all my free pen of steers to get that thing up out of the hock. So I turned the key off, shut that feedlot down. But in the meantime, while the feedlot was there, the bull test station, Doyle Williams come down and helped me build my office buildings. So we had the feedlot and the bull test and American Cattle Service. Kenneth was just starting ACS. So we had those office buildings, and I built a little feed store on the west end of it that I sold a little dab of feed, hardware supplies, bolts, nuts, and wire pliers, and got a little bit of traffic down there. In fact, the matter one thing I remember about the grocery store, old fat average Bill Blankenship was working for me. And so every day, Bill, I'd send him over there in the cafe. I'd make him wash his hands. He'd go in the cafe and cut up and I was buying my meat sticks out of a big meat cooler off of Johnny Hester. He was working for, I think, Swift Meat Company or for some big meat company. So I made a deal with Johnny where I could buy some of them sticks of bologna and ham and whatever, cheese. So I'd send Bill out there and he'd cut up a whole box full of sandwiches. And I'd send him over to Hollister, the elevators, but there wasn't no cafe in Hollister. So Bill would go over and sell sandwiches every day at dinner. He'd come back and have his pocket just full of them. He said, "Man, I done good, didn't I?" I said, "Yeah, you done good again." So I said, "I need to move this thing up on the highway." Oh, now this could get into a long story. So I finally got me a house mover out of Indiana. He come down there and they got her all jacked up because it was old cedar boards. It's all made out of old rough cedar. And there wasn't no floors all on concrete. So we got it all jacked up, scored up, and got it in 3 different compartments to where he could move it. So it started snowing. And we couldn't get out of the road. I'd already cleared the ground up there and poured the slab where a ham supply was. So I remember I told him one day, I said, "I got to get this thing up there. I got to start taking in some money." He said, "Well, I don't think I can pull up that creek bank." That was before they put the new bridge in. So I said, "I got an old 50-20 tractor with a blade on it. I'll get in behind you and I'll push you and you pull." So we pushed and pulled them buildings up there, set them down, added on to the pieces in between, and then I had Orville Emmons come down to help me build that on and add to it. And anything else you need to know before I get into this, you need to bring it up.
No, I'm just going to let you talk. Go ahead.
So, and Arlene, Jeff wasn't old enough at that time. She was wanting a show calf. So after we got all this built, and I come up with her a show calf, got one out of the pasture, I think, somewhere. And come show day, we brought her to the show, and the only thing we had to dress then was old Russ Doc Brannon's purple oil and show foam, and John Patterson's Patterson Peach. A piece of wool army blanket, that's where they buy them old wool army blankets, and a rice fruit brush, and an Amway honey glycerin bar to bone the legs with. That was it. So we got to the show and got the cattle all dressed and showed. I was sitting there looking, I said, "This ain't right." I said, "I just think about all them beautiful young ladies that are beautiful, that compete in the local pageants, the state pageants, and the national pageants. What would they look like if you just jumped them up out of bed and run them out there on the stage? What would they look like?" I said, "This got to be changed. We got to give them cattle some kind of," I realized it, knowing it wouldn't help anything on the conformation of the cattle. It kind of helped you hide up some holes and blemishes, but the visual eye appearance would make them look better. So I started that long road, and back then, oh, how I wish we'd have had computers then, or even a cell phone. So I started out, and I said, "Well, I need to get some kind of good hair set that we could work this hair with." Because back then, a lot of the cattle had cowlicks on them. A lot of the Hereford cattle had wavy hair. We need something where we can work that hair. So I went to every beauty salon in Oklahoma, close, Texas, Wichita, Lawton, and talked to them beauty supply ladies, what they used on ladies' different type of hair, what kind of concentrate. So I was writing it all down. I made all the rounds. Well, when I come home, and consequently, most of the ladies that used the most of it from one company. So I called that company and I told them what I was going to do, or trying to do, and could I get a dealership? They said, "Yes, sir." So they'd come in little pint jars, little bitty bottles. And we started out, and I'd get me a 5-gallon bucket, and I'd mix and get me a sample that I like, and then I'd go to the barn and get a calf and shoot. I'd try it out on him, work it. I'd try another deal, pour that out. Finally got one that I'd work for the hair. So I wrote that down. That's what I want right there. So then I'd go and another work on the hard hair and the mild hair. So I had to have about 4 different ingredients. So, and then every time they'd send me samples, I'd have to go to shoot, get a calf in, get it on there, try it, see if it worked. And then I got it all finalized that I wanted. So I called this company and asked them could they start sending that to me, and more than 1 or 2 call you out there, we'll send you how many cases you want. So I started buying it in case lots, in little jugs. Well, before long, I had to start buying it. I asked them would they put it in gallon jugs. And oh yeah. Well, thank the good Lord, wasn't for long. I asked them could they put it in 55-gallon barrels. Because it was such an ordeal, because we had a 35-gallon mixing tank and had 4 6-gallon tanks that hold 24 gallons. And it's so much an ordeal pouring all them little bottles in there. And then that jug getting the right measurement, because every batch I made had to be perfect, or I'd dump it and build a new batch. So they started sending it to me in 55-gallon barrels. Well, then I needed some kind of an adhesive to hold that tail when they wrapped that tail. So I'd seen one boy somewhere using a can of 3M77. And by George, that tail, he got it up there. You could use it for a hammer when he got through. So I went to calling all them different adhesive companies. Well, of course, they wouldn't set me up because they had big distributors, auto parts stores, all over the country. So I went around to all the stores, getting all their different adhesives. And I'd take them out there, and I'd try them. Well, it rocked long as get so much trouble getting the stereo up to try it. I had an Australian shepherd that was my right arm and leg around the cattle, and a close friend, Bud, old Bud. So Bud had hair, kind of like on some cattle. The dog hair didn't have the extrusion that the cattle hair had, but it's close. So when I'd start out getting adhesive samples in, I'd call this company. I found up the one company that'd make me what I wanted. So I'd tell them kind of what I wanted. And in the process of telling them, I might as well have been trying to tell a duck what I was wanting. Because them people didn't know a steer from a rhinoceros. But anyway, I said, send me 10 cans. I want this adhesive to dry quick. I want it to be a mellow adhesive. I want it to be clear and neutral. I want it to be semi-sticky, blah, 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 blah. So they sent me 10 cans, all numbered. Well, I got too much trouble getting the stir up. So one day I said, I'll use that on old Bud. I hollered at Bud, and boy, here he come. Thought we was going to go work cattle. So I got him up on his desk there, and I was crazy. Well, I did that I don't know how many times. He got to the point where when I hollered Bud, of course, here he'd come. Because he stayed in the warehouse because he was warm in the winter and semi-cool in the summer. But if he saw me with a spray bottle or a can, he'd run hide under the desk. But I finally got that adhesive all materialized and got the ones that I wanted. I had about 7 different kinds. So I called this company and told them it's what I wanted. And they started building it for me. Yeah. So I had that adhesive deal behind me, so I had the product there to dress the animal's hair and stuff. So then we needed a blow dryer. The blow dryer on the market was a good blow dryer, but I wanted one better. So I went to designing it, and the first one was that little Hammer's blow dryer, but it was just too small. But then I went to the 2-motor, and I had to watch because all the breakers in all the livestock barns are nearly all 20-amp breakers. Well, and most all your bigger motors, your vac motors, would pull up to 22, 24 amps. well, you couldn't use them. So, but I found some motors that would work powerful enough for what I wanted. So I started putting them in a PVC canister to eliminate the shock in case there's an internal short in the blower. Because them steel blowers, they can't knock the water out of you. So I sold a bunch and bunches of those. But then I finally found the motors that just pulled 18 amp, but they put out a whole lot more CFMs than any other motor I could find. So I called that company and had them send me a few, and I had to put them in a steel canister like that one there for the way I had it designed. And so I started out with a Hamm 3, and it went over like gangbusters. Fact of the matter, I still get a few calls even today. Want to know anywhere we can get a Hamm 3 blow dryer. And I said, no, I wish there was, not anymore.
eBay. You can get them on eBay. My kids have bought them on eBay. And
Not a new one.
No, not a new one, but they don't go cheap either.
So I got the blower deal wound up, and I found me a leather company in Pocket City, Oklahoma, that built the halters and the sweat collars and leather products like I wanted. So they started building all my leather products. And so I got that took care of. And then I needed a show stick. Well, back then, the only thing we had was those wood sorting poles. You cut a groove in the bottom of it and tie a wire around the bottom and bend a hook on it. Well, you get an old post-legged steer and start trying to move one of his feet forward where you straighten your hook out, and there you are up the river without a paddle. Just got a straight stick. And most of them little fellas now, an adult or senior showman, he's big enough, he can reach back with his foot. So with the most on the left side, but went over on the right side, he couldn't get over there to them. So I figured out the design that I wanted, and I went over to Cameron College and met with a molding instructor over there, and told him what I was wanting. He said, yeah, I got a young man I think can fix you up. So I hit him up, and me and him talking. I had it drawn out on a piece of paper what I wanted. I wanted a short spur and a long spur show stick. And I said, can you build these like I want? Yeah, I think so. I said, well, I'll pay you to build a mold for each. And you pour me a couple of them, and I'll look at them. If I like them, I'll give you a big order. So he said, okay. So he built them. They looked perfect. So I paid him to build some big molds. He poured a bunch at one time. Then I started having trouble. No computer, no Google, just that blame landline. We don't want to get into that landline. Just that landline. So I finally found a company that manufactured the show stick shafts. And I was talking to him, and this old boy said, he says, what you're saying, you might be interested in our rejects. I said, well, it depends whether they're rejected or not. Well, he said they're reject to the golf club manufacturers. So I said, can you send me a couple of three of the shaft and the grips, the rubber grips? So he sent me some. I said, this day, I don't know what was the matter with them shafts. They looked to be perfect. Now the grips, they've all had little indentions in them, and then they'd have paint in them little indentions. And some of it, the paint didn't get in the little indention. That was all wrong with them. So I got the shaft and the grip took care of. Then I got to having a problem. I couldn't find a bit to drill a hole in that show stick in that I could fit, and all them golf shafts were the same diameter. They'd fit in there tight enough that I could hammer it in there and wedge it, and you didn't have to worry about it pulling off. And at that time, I didn't know they had I had lettered bits. So I gets on the phone, and I finally bought me a set of Thomas Restory books, about 15, 20, 30 volume books. But it'd take you forever to go through them. But I finally found a bit manufacturing company in Oklahoma City. So I drove up there, took my show stick and tip and my shaft, told this one fellow what I was wanting. he got his mic out and he went to the mic and yeah, he said, you need a pea-size bit. I said, a what? You need a pea-size. I said, a black-eyed pea? No, not a black-eyed pea. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, P. So I finally got my bits found. So that took care of the show stick deal. Well, then I needed to start building these poly halters. So he gets on his phone again. I called all over the world, finding a company that built me the type of rope that I wanted and for the price that I could afford. So I worked and finally come up with this one company in Michigan that would do what I wanted. So they sent me samples and I'd get back there and I'd try it. And I said, yeah, that's the rope I want. So I called them up and I said, yeah, that's the rope I want. But I said, I want to put a yellow tracer in it. Well, they said, now you'll have to buy 10 spools to get that yellow tracer. Because I want to use it as a company trademark. Because the only other halters on the market was John Patterson's and he had a white one. So when I was walking up and down them aisles, them show barns, I could look, see who was using John. Well, I need to talk to that old boy. So anyway, he said, you got to buy 10 spools. I said, sure, I guess eventually I can sell 10 spools. So I said, let's try it. Well, as it wound up, I had 6 different colors. And when I'd order rope, I'd order 20 spools of each color. And they were spools 4 foot tall and about 2.5 foot wide. And old Theodore Stevenson, God bless him, his poor old hands looked like just deformed. But he had cut out a truckload of rope and burned that day, take it home at night, sit there in his chair, watch TV and build halters. So, and at that time, we were selling halters $24 a dozen. Now then, they tell me halters cost $5, $6 a piece. So I got that done, got my halter. Well, I needed a show box to put the stuff in. All we had was stuff that the ag boys had made at the ag barn. 4-H club kids had one of the mom or daddy's old trunks. Some of them just had their water buckets. So I got on that phone again. And I finally found me a mold injector in South Texas. And it consequently is one that he was a cattle breeder also. I was shipping him a lot of supplies for his own cattle. So I called him up and told him what I wanted. He said, yeah. Said, I know what you're talking about. So I'd love to see one of them out there on the market. I said, I want a fiberglass padded seat show box. One pretty good size. I shouldn't have made it so big because some of them boys wound up trying to put their calf in it, plus all the show supplies. But anyway, one day he come driving up the yard, had this show box in the back of his pickup. Well, that's a box we still got out in the box room now. And Arlene and Jeff used it all through his showing career. A phenomenal box, but heavy. And it was a rather expensive box because it had the carpet, and I had trouble finding a cushion that I wanted to put on it that was durable, tough. So I finally found a company that built a cushion like I wanted. And they were the ones that built all the cushions and seats for the Ranger Bass Boat Company. So I had good cushions. Put black carpet on the interior, put show stick holders, aerosol can holders on the side. And so come up with those boxes and sold them. Don Dick Dunham had a fiberglass units, and he rented part of the old gin building down here. And he went in there and worked like a Turk, getting everything set up and started out. Well, on this show box, I asked Bob, I said, what do you take for that mold idea of it? He said, I'll bring you the pigs and the mold and won't charge you nothing. But he said, you've been good to me on my show supplies and treated me right and my kids. And he said, I won't charge you nothing. So he brought us later on the pigs what to shoot the mold off of. He said he'd take care of it. And Don Dick started. Well, bless his heart, it got to the point we couldn't get the mold, couldn't get the form, the box out of the mold. He'd used everything but dynamite trying to get them out. Tore up 4 or 5 boxes trying to get them out. But he finally figured out the problem, got that corrected, where we could pop them boogers out of there, just boom, 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 boom. And so we started selling them, bunches and bunches. He finally built a trailer. He could hold 20 boxes at a time. And just every few days he'd bring us 20 more boxes. But it got to the point that Don Dick, Dad, Dick Dunham, was having health problems. They still lived there where Don Dick lives now. But Don Dick moved all his equipment down there. Well, Dick, being the man he was, he wanted to be involved. He would be out there around it amongst it. So Don Dick got worried and telling me that he was kind of afraid that his dad breathing that resin and that catalyst and that gel coat and fiberglass wasn't doing him any good. And he was having trouble keeping good health. So I found some boys over at Geronimo that would do the fiberglassing for me. So they started doing all my fiberglass work. And in the meantime, Don Dick built me a little bull show box. Built a pig for it to design. So we could take that little bull show box, and when it was going to the major shows, we could set it on the inside of the big bull, and then we could fill it full of rope halters, the little bull box. So we could haul a lot more stuff. And then it got to where the boxes were so expensive that I started building that galvanized show box, the one that's out there now. And they've got Cadillacs out there now. But I got in, I bought all the 10 building equipment, and bending and formed. And so we started building the galvanized show boxes then. And then I needed the block and shoot that was portable and fold down. So I designed a block and shoot that would fold down, and started building them, started selling them. And when I had 2 men there in the shop, one of them, old Edgar Hamm May was one of them. I had Jerry before I started Hamm Supply, and I still got him now. I tell everybody, he's kind of like the itch. You get it, you can't get rid of it. But bless old Jerry, he's still coming out, doing what little he can do. So I got that block and shoot all over. Then it wasn't nothing but steel. So I got that all finalized. So then I said, well, I need to build me a little show trailer. So I go around to the local shows, neighboring counties. So I built me a little trailer, wound up calling it the Ark, because I had to add on to it 3 different times. And then I had to build into another trailer, and then the 3rd trailers we wound up with 3 trailers. And then the wheels had started turning on them pretty well, grease bearings. Everything rolled along pretty smooth. But we was having trouble because the only freight we had was Mistletoe Express. Tom and Lita Fry had the first express office down here at the freight house, south of town. Well, there's a lot of places in town they didn't call on. Well, finally I got UPS out there, so they'd bring a truck out every day and back up to the load-out dock, load the trucks up. So that solved a lot. I was having to put in the pickup, haul it up here to Tom. So that eased it up. And so then I started going to different ag and extension direct conventions around the different states, getting a little more exposure. And then we started getting dealer inquiries. So I started setting up dealers. And at the end, we had a dealer in about nearly all 48 adjacent states. Had a few dealers in southern Canada and east western Canada. Had one large distributor in Australia. We even shipped some supplies to Japan, not show supplies, but they were veterinary supplies such as needles, syringes, stomach pumps, thermometers, ear tags, and etc. So that, and the only requirement I had to my dealers that they could pull out to any show I was at. Made no difference where or what. Pulled a trailer right up beside my trailer, but none of them ever did that. But I said, if you got supplies you need, well, you can load, after the show, you can load them out of my trailer and put them in yours and save freight. And that goes the exception of 2 shows, Oklahoma City show and the Tulsa show. Because I said those ag teachers and those 4-H kids and extension directors and parents and breeders and fitters started to be in the show business. So I said, I give all the ag chapters and all the 4-H clubs, I give them all a discount. So, and I said, I've already cleared it with the concession committees at both shows. And they told me, said, yeah, Ed, that'll be fine, said, you're all we need. That made me feel good. So that was the only stipulation. They couldn't pull in those 2 shows. That leads up to another long story. So, like I say, that was kind of the life of the starting out. That was the conception and the growing of Hamm Supply.
Well, there's still lots of people use those blowers, I know that, and lots of people look for them, shop them.
Well, I get it. Like I say, I get so many calls. Well, do I need to go ahead and finish the rest of the Hamm Supply story or not?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, it rocked along there, like I say. All the wheels was turning on good grease bearings, and all the lights was burning. And the good Lord was blessing me. I mean, it was great. Well, I get to thinking about this, I may break down a little bit. Sickness came up in our family. My wife had a malignant brain tumor, and I had this massive heart attack. Well, that knocked us both plumb out of the boat. Because when I was on the road so much showing, Mom, she was the hub of Hamm Supply. She couldn't, no way she could ever get back into that, and I knew it. And I knew the trouble I had trying to get to where I could even get around, I was going to have trouble. And so, by me not being up there, and all them god blame ag teachers in Cattleman, they'd always holler, Hamm, get us some new supplies, get something out new. Here, we got to have this here. Well, I couldn't do it. And getting into the story, I'll tell you on here in just a second. In that process of where the dealers couldn't show at the same show, couldn't trailer at the same show as Oklahoma City and Tulsa. One year my trailer came in from Tulsa and come down to the house and told me, said Sullivan had a trailer up at Tulsa. So I called the show manager, a young lady. I said, I hear there's another, yeah. Said he was over in the farm equipment exhibit. Said he wasn't down here in the show barn, livestock area. He was plumb down by the Coliseum. So I knew I couldn't get a hold of him because he had different shows he had to make. Well, that was John Sullivan. And so I finally got a hold of him. I said, John, what's the deal here on you pull the trailer in Tulsa? You know what my agreement was, and your agreement. Well, he said I had some blocking shoes I had to deliver to a customer up there. Well, in the meantime, I'd had several different ag teachers and customers. So we'd seen Sullivan's trailer, and he had your supplies sitting out on the shelf. And then he'd be talking, and we'd ask him about it. He'd pull one of his name on the can. Said, you need to try this. Well, I said it then, and I'll say it now. Anything worth doing is dang sure worth trying to copy. So I don't hold a grudge against him for that. But anyway, our partnership dissolved. Well, by Sullivan being a fitter, young man, very energetic, a lot of livestock know-how, and showing show cattle all over the United States. He knew coming out with a new product, well, Hamm Supply wasn't coming out with that, because I wasn't up there. So Hamm Supply went to slipping. And with no disrespect to none of my employees, not every one of them, but one, I'll get to that later. I wasn't you. So, when it boiled down to it, to tell you how faithful my employees was, when I was laying up there in the Lawton Hospital, trying to get my heart to mend enough to where they could do heart surgery on me, because they told me they couldn't do surgery on my heart because my heart was tore up so bad it wouldn't withstand it. So I had to lay in the hospital till their heart could get mended enough to where they could do surgery. Well, while I was up there, Jeff, I think someone called me and said, and I had one old gal, I call her the whistleblower, that was helping us a little. The reason why she was working for us, her husband was a good hand. He could help out in the welding shop, box room, mixing room, and anywhere I wanted him, help me work cattle. And he told me one day his wife needed to work, so I said, well, I'll put her to work. Well, I did. Well, so I think it's Jeff got a hold of Tony. Well, the next day, Tony come to my hospital room. He come in there and said, don't you worry about one thing. I can still see him. And my eyes are bugging. He said, don't you worry about one thing. I'm going to take care of every bit of this. You just get well and get out of here. I said, okay. I don't know at the hours he and Sandra Fisher Emmons, my secretary, I don't know how many hours they spent in that office getting all them past records up on overtime. Because I made an agreement, like I said, for all my employees, I didn't pay any overtime. But if they ever needed extra money for anything, holidays, sickness, whatever, said put in as many hours a week that you want to put in. Put in all hours except on Sunday. Said put in all hours that you need, and that'll be fine with me. So Sandra had to figure all this up. Days and hours, I'm sure. Oh, I wished I could have been there when this happened. So she got it all done. She made out a check to every employee. And at that time, I don't know, there's 10 or 12 of them. And how Tony found this out, I don't know, but he found out on the whistleblower that she had started her time when she left. They lived in Frederick. She had started her time when they left Frederick. Well, she wouldn't stop her time till they get home. They'd stop by the grocery store, or maybe the laundromat, or hardware store, and do all her shopping. But when she got home, she'd stop her time. But he found all that out. Well, like I say, I wish I could have been there. I didn't really like her no way. And so Sandra gave Tony this handful of checks. And some of them checks was astronomical on time. Because some of them employees put in 60, 70 hours a week. Handed her check. I can't remember now. It was somewhere around $20. Well, they said her face got just as red as a fire engine truck. They said she swelled up like a big fat toad, and out that door she went, and never seen her back in there again. Lucky for her. So Tony went handing the rest of my employees these checks. Every one of them endorsed it, went and gave it back to Sandra, and it wound back up in Hamm Supply bank account. That's the kind of employees that I had. Good bunch of kids. So I decided, well, I can say I'm not going to be able to run that thing. And Jeff, he was tired of winding up a little schooling, and he'd have to take care of all the farming and the ranching, and doing what help he could do there at Hamm Supply. But I'll tell this on him, he don't like four walls and a ceiling. He likes the outdoors. Chasing cattle, burning diesel, he likes that. So I said, well, Jeff ain't gonna be able to take it with all this other. And Arlene couldn't take it because she had a high position at SMU University. So I said, I guess I'm just gonna have to sell it. Well, I'd had several inquiries of people wanting to buy it. So this old boy, he come up, he and his wife. Well, to make this long story short, I finally wound up and made an agreement with them to where they'd take it over for me. And I let them use the Hamm Supply buildings and warehouses. Didn't charge them nothing. The only thing they had to pay was the utilities and the insurance. Well, it started the first right out of the box. I walked in the store one day to get me a pop. And one of my shipping girls was sitting back there at her desk crying. And I walked back there and I said, Sugar, what's the matter? She said, I just got fired. I said, you what? She said, you just got fired over what? Well, she said, I can't remember the school. One of the ag teachers called up and he turned in about a $10,000 or $12,000 order. Block and shoes, show boxes, blow dryers, clippers, but they had to get bids from one or two other suppliers. And he told her, he said, now, the lowest bid I got, and he give her the amount. He said, you can just beat that $1. Because he said, I want all of y'all's supplies. I want your boxes and your blowers. So she knew what I'd done in the past 20 years. You know, when you're dealing in volume, you can whittle a little. You got room. So she knocked off. It wasn't $10 or $12. Well, when this man that I let have that thing, he got wind of it, and he jumped all over and fired her. So she told me about it. So he was back there in the office. I went back there, and I tried then not to get mad because I knew I was still trying to live. And I walked in. I said, "Say, you just got through firing one of the better girls that I've had here for years." "Yeah, I did." So I'll fire another to do it. I said, overcutting it. I said, you had I can't remember, $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 order. And you fired this overcutting you off $10,000, $12,000. Yeah, I said, you can't go to the grocery store, buy a big cart full of groceries and get a discount on them. I said, you ain't dealing with grocery people. You're dealing with livestock people. They wheel and deal on bargains. And I said, if you can give a little, you need to give a little. I ain't doing it. Well, I knew then my bubble was fixing to lose some air. And another one of the worst deals, at all these winter shows particularly, Hamm Supply Trailer was kind of the headquarters for the trailer to where when the parents got lost and couldn't find herself, there's a few shows announced on the PA system. If any of you parents are lost and can't find your stall set up, go to Hamm Station. You've got a fella there or a little girl that'll take you to your stall. So I had candy jars in the trailer. Them little kids come in, nearly every one of them knew what candy was. They'd get their candy and warm. Well, I had 2 or 3, 4, 5, 6 or 8 customers called me later and said, Hamm, my kids went up to your trailer out at Denver, or Kansas City, or so they run them out of the trailer, scolding, stomping their feet at them. I said, that bubble's getting smaller. Well, I pulled by there one day and said, I'm going to stop and get me a soda pop. So I went in there. I walked around and looked behind. I seen 3 or 4 semis and vans backed up there. And I walked back there and I said, what in the world are you getting in that many trucks? Oh, he said, I've got a deal in South Texas. They're going to give me the building and not charge me any tax the first year. I said, South Texas? Yeah. I said, well, fella, I said, down there, all your summer shows for sure, and even your winter shows, That's going to be all slick-haired cattle. It's going to be all Brahmas and Brahma crosses and a few girts. And I said, you won't be able to sell any short grooming supplies. And I said, plus you're going to have to pay more freight getting your products that you're using to build products with down there. And he said, well, I'm not going to be talking to that duck again. So I kept getting calls from different dealers and customers that Ed, this one machine ain't working like it did, this show broom ain't working like it did, or kaboom ain't working like it did. Said it just, and then half the orders we send in is back ordered. So I had 3 or 4 good ag teacher friends down there in Texas. I asked them boys to go by and check that deal out. So they went by and called me back. Said, Ed, he hadn't got enough supplies in that building to fill up one of your show trailers. So I come back and talked to my lawyer. He said, you made the bed, you got to lay in it. So I decided, shoot, if that bunch can live with it, I can live without it. So anyway, in the process of trying to get through that healing and get through that sickness, when June and I had that, she had that massive brain tumor and I had that massive heart attack. Thank God, and I think that's one of the ladies sits right there. Her and her husband with my right arm for weeks and months by our side all the time, day and night, giving us spiritual encouragement, man and wife encouragement, helping everything they could do. Facts about her. Long before our souls got out of Ham supply, her husband, Howard Oxford, he put a horse twitch on my nose, tied a rope around my neck, and drugged me off on them fishing and hunting trips. Well, Marlene had either come over and stay at the house and take care of Mom, or else we'd take her over to Marlene's if Marlene had things she had to do and stay there. But thank the good Lord for them and to other kin folks and friends and neighbors, because we had a long, rugged road to get over. But them 2 people right there, I'll never be able to thank them enough. Not ever. Not ever. So, do you want to tell them about the telephone?
I will just, in closing, because we're
In closing.
we're running out of time. I went to work for Edgar when I was in college, and just afternoon, I think it was in the winter or something, I didn't have anything going on the farm, so I went to work.
It's winter time.
Went to work for Edgar. Well, at the time, Joey's back there, telephone. Anyway, at the time, we had a lot of issues with the phone lines. The phone didn't work out there all the time. Well, that was everybody called. That's where all the orders came in on the phone. So you sat there with the phone. And I was like, I'm going to go to work out there. So Sandra and I worked. Well, I go out the first day I go in there, and I've known Edgar all my life. The first day I go in there, he's on a little upset, and I don't remember if it's a crowbar or a hammer, and proceeded, because the phones weren't working.
For 2 days, right before Denver, when all of my users was calling in orders for us to bring to Denver for them. Well, I could walk in there and all 8, 10, 12, 15 employees sitting in their chair. Nothing to do. Go on.
Long story short, I don't remember now if it was a hammer, a crowbar, or whatever, but he proceeded to pull all the phones off the wall, all the phones off the desk, and they were out to the middle of the highway. Calls, it wasn't Pioneer at the time, Joey, it was General Telephone of Oklahoma. Calls said, you can come out here and get these phones because they're laying in the middle of the road. That was my first experience at Ham Supply.
Well, let me tell you, he's telling the truth. But what led up to that, I'd made I don't know how many trips to that phone office down here where it used to be, see if they found out anything about getting the phone back into my building. Well, no, we haven't had, there wasn't nobody, couldn't see nobody but the girls in behind the desk because all the boys was out. Because I remember coming to town, I could see one or two phone trucks sitting at a pedestal. So I said, by George, they're finally working on it. They're going to get me a phone. I'm going to get back in business. I ain't going to have to start picking up beer cans to buy groceries with. So I head back out there and I stopped at this first one. I can't remember where it was at or who it was. I said, you working on the phone line going out to Ham Supply? No, said, we're putting these cattle air tags numbered. We're our identification number in each one of these pedestals. I said, that's all you're doing? Yeah. Said, you're not working on no phone? No. So I go on the next one, same story. The next one, the same story. And I went to 4 of them. All 4 of them boys. They wasn't doing nothing but putting tag number identification on each one of them pedestals. That was it. And that's when it got into Jay's story. So, I got to finish this. I got in my pickup and I drove back up here because I figured I was going to jail. I drove back up here and there happened to be 1 or 2 of the boys in the office at that time. I said, boys, y'all's phones are out there in the middle of the road. They wasn't in the middle of the road, it was in the driveway. Nice pile of them. And I said, I've done it and I'll do it again if this ever happens. Well, lo and behold, before I got home, poor old Larry Joe McElroy was out there with a box full of phones. He went in there, and boy, he went to nailing and screwing, putting it up. And a little bit, it sounded like jingle bells. Phones are ringing. Ring, 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 ring. So that was the story on the telephone.
Well, as you guys can tell, this could be a series of multiple interviews, but we've kept you long enough. But we want to thank Edgar for many more things than Ham Supply. Through the years, he served on boards. He's worked at the church. He's been on every board in town. And people like him are hard to. They don't come along anymore. They're hard to replace. I'm preaching to the choir. But I want to thank him for the things that he's done for this community and put Frederick on the map many, many times through the years. And we want to thank him for allowing me to put him on the spot. And we thank you guys for coming and listening to the confessions. And we're going to call it a day on that. And I'll let you ask him whatever. If you got any questions, I'll let you guys ask him whatever you want to do. And we've got things to drink and cookies, so please come on in and help yourself.
Well, I want to thank Jay and the Historical Society for giving me the opportunity to come up here and blow a little smoke on some of my business. It got a high wind, it's blowing away right quick, but I want to thank the Historical Society. It's a very good organization, and it's something that we all need to contribute to when we get a chance.
Thank you, guys.
Don't start hollering more. Don't start hollering more.